The following presentation is a recorded event hosted by the Nutrition and Aging Resource Center on February 8th, 2022.
My name is Erin Hoisington. I am with the Nutrition and Aging Resource Center, and I am going to turn it over to Alex Bauman with the Nutrition and Aging Resource Center to tell you a little bit more about us.
Thanks, Erin. Yes, I am the director of the Nutrition and Aging Resource Center, and I am going to share my screen to show you how you can connect with us and how you can access these grant opportunities. So this is our website, the Nutrition and Aging Resource Center, found at acl.gov/senior nutrition. And right here, all of these links, I should say, are located in the chat. So you can locate our website, and this is how you sign up for our newsletter. So you access this page and you can click this button in the top right corner to sign up for our newsletter. It's really the best way to stay up to date with new things on the website and any upcoming webinars and events. This is our events calendar where you can register for those upcoming events and webinars like we mentioned. We're on a lot of social media channels. So we're on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, Pinterest, and even TikTok, all at Aging Nutrition. So on there, especially our Facebook and Instagram page, there's a lot of great images and things that you can share on your own pages, so you don't have to recreate the wheel. And also a lot of ways to stay up to date with new resources, things that other people in the network are doing that are innovative, and any kind of new research coming out. So our YouTube channel has all of our recorded webinars. So this webinar is being recorded and will be shared on the YouTube page. We also have a recorded webinar for the research grant. It's just a quick 20-minute webinar. So if you're interested in learning more about the research 2022 Innovations and Nutrition Programs and Services grant by ACL, we recommend you check that out. So back to our website, we made it really easy for you to find the grant opportunity by clicking on this link right on the home page. And that brings you to this ACL website where it includes the replication and research grant. And right here, there's a replication model toolkits link where it will bring you to a page that lists the 4 models that can be replicated, and it includes really helpful toolkit that has a lot of replication type materials, FAQs about the particular project. So we really recommend you spend some time digging into some of those resources. The link on the ACL page will bring you to the grant opportunity, which is located at grants.gov. So the application is due March 10th. And in the related documents page, you can see the full announcement and the FAQ page, which is very helpful. You know, ACL is hosting an informational conference call tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern time. So any of your technical questions that you have for ACL about the grant can be asked during that time. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Erin.
Thank you so much, Alex. All right, so as I said before, we are now going to hear from Dr. Mary Chase Mize with Georgia State University, presenting on Senior Nutrition Program Evidence-Based Suicide Intervention Training. Dr. Mize, just let me know when you need me to advance slides and I can do that for you.
All right, thank you so much, Erin. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to share some information with you about what we did and what we learned from our project, which was equipping the nutrition services program in our area with suicide intervention skills training. You can advance to the next slide, please. So I do want to kind of go over some of the goals that we had in mind when we when we applied for this grant and when we started this project. I'm going to focus more so on goals 2 and 3 as it pertains to this webinar. So first, we really wanted to understand who within the aging services network who received a home delivered meal and who also in addition to that, also visited congregate meal sites, had elevated risk of suicide or mental health distress. That was one, working kind of piece of the project that we had. Our second goal was we wanted to equip home delivered meal volunteers with evidence-based suicide intervention training. And that's ASSIST, that's Applied Suicide Intervention Skills Training. I'll talk a little bit more about that training when I kind of talk through some of the project outcomes. And then really our third goal there was to understand how the Aging Services Network through nutrition services could be optimized to respond to suicide risk and mental health distress. So I'm a postdoc and co-investigator of this project, and I work at Georgia State University in counseling and psychological services, and I am a professional counselor by that's what I do. And so this is kind of where our work in mental health and some of the work that we're doing with kind of meeting that with community-based research and really finding a way to provide this really powerful intervention and these skills with home delivered meal volunteers. You can advance to the next slide. So just kind of an overview, our population, we targeted older adults over 60 who received home delivered meals and who also participated in congregate meal centers. Now, COVID definitely impacted some of this, and I would say the primary focus of most of some of this aspect of the intervention was mostly with home delivered meal volunteers. We did train some folks who worked in congregate meal centers in this intervention training, but it was for the most part really focused on home delivered meal recipients. And that's kind of how we, adapted and kind of shifted things when COVID hit in 2020. And we worked within the Metro Atlanta area in urban and suburban counties. Our partners included the Atlanta Regional Commission, which is the Atlanta Area Agency on Aging. And so the counties within that area were Central Fulton, where Atlanta is, North Fulton, Clayton County, Henry County, Cobb County, and DeKalb County. And so we participated with the senior services of each of those counties, as well as the various programs and vendors who are responsible for overseeing home delivered meals to clients who were served in those counties. And then we provided the ASSIST training. And again, ASSIST is Applied Suicide Intervention Skills Training. It's a 2-day training, so it's 14 hours. And it's a standardized and manualized training in suicide intervention skills. So it's a lot different from a lot of other kind of programs that can maybe focus on awareness training and identification and things like that. The ASSIST training really is suicide first aid. And during that 2-day training, participants learn how to help someone who may be at risk of suicide in the moment when they need help the most. That can actually decrease the need for additional referrals because the person who knows those skills knows how to help in the moment when it's needed. Very similar to CPR. You don't have to be a cardiologist to know and to use CPR if someone's experiencing a crisis. Similar kind of thing to the ASSIST training. You learn skills that can help someone in the moment when help is needed most. And we trained just about a little over 160 volunteers who provide home delivered meals, staff of congregate meal centers and senior services in general in ASSIST. I'm also an ASSIST trainer, and I was a part of most of these trainings. And the training is a standardized and manualized training. So the same training that we delivered to each participant in our study was the same training that you would get if you were in Auckland, New Zealand, or Edinburgh, Scotland, or Memphis, Tennessee. It is an evidence-based training. It's recognized in SAMHSA, in the evidence-based registry. And some of the studies that landed ASSIST as an evidence-based suicide intervention training showed the effectiveness of folks who were trained in ASSIST, who screened and who were phone counselors on the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. I'm happy to share more information about some of the research behind that. But a big goal of this project is to compile and provide evidence base of ASSIST as an effective suicide intervention training specific to populations of older adults to be recognized on the National Council on Aging Evidence-Based Training. And we are working through that application process now. I'll kind of skip over this other part here, but just kind of going back to that first goal that was about kind of understanding suicide risk and mental health distress among HDM recipients. Our lab conducted interviews with HDM recipients in person as well as over the phone once the shift happened because of COVID, and administered validated measures of suicide, depression, pain, and mental health distress. You can advance to the next slide, please. So we have a lot of really powerful outcomes. This was probably some of the most rewarding research and work I've ever been a part of. I really want to hit a couple of high points here of what we did and how thinking through this through the lens of replication, using these similar kinds of understandings of what do home delivered meal volunteers gain and how do they change as a result of receiving the ASSIST training. So one thing we found is that folks who received the ASSIST training had an increase in suicide intervention skills. The skills that we gave before the ASSIST training, we administered a survey to all the volunteers that included an objective skill, or measure of skill acquisition called the Suicide Intervention Response Inventory 2, the SIRI 2. So we gave participants, volunteers, HDM volunteers, this measure that had the SIRI 2, as well as some measures around attitudes and kind of beliefs around suicide. And as a result of the ASSIST training, and we did pair sample tests to determine this, we found that there was a significant improvement in suicide intervention skill among participants who received the ASSIST training, as well as more constructive attitudes about suicide prevention. And what we mean by that is, we never ask anyone to change what they think or believe or feel about suicide. In the training, what we really want folks to do is just kind of become aware of their own beliefs and biases around suicide and suicide intervention, to get in touch with that. And as a result of that, we kind of see these shifts and some more just helpful ways of thinking and being when it comes to suicide intervention response. So like I mentioned earlier, we trained over 160 HDM providers and volunteers. We also developed a tracking tool so that after folks who were trained in ASSIST received the training, they could kind of track and tell us if they used any of the skills that they learned in the intervention model that they learned in the training. I'll talk about that on the next slide. We also had these evaluations of folks who received HDM as well as congregate meal recipients pre and during COVID, which is pretty incredible that we have kind of both of those different time points in our data. Another thing we did was we qualitatively interviewed 20 volunteers who went through the ASSIST training and some used the skills in real life, some didn't. And we kind of talked about their experiences to understand the impact of this training within the Aging Network. And that article, that research paper that we wrote from that study was actually just accepted for publication. And so that will be able to be shared as a resource for anyone who's interested. Next slide, please. So this is, I want to just kind of show some of the data here. Right here on my left is just means differences and standard deviations from the SIRI 2. And this is, what I really want you to know here is how this is scored, is when you see a lower number, it means that there was an improvement in skill. And we kind of examine this in a couple of different ways. So here, lower meant more skill, higher is more skill, lower is more skill, higher is more skill. And this is just a kind of a brief snapshot of, you can see just how much change happened in mean scores between pre and post of this SIRI 2, the Suicide Intervention Skill Inventory. We also, like I mentioned earlier, we also did paired sample t-tests, p-values of less than 0.01 across the board, less than 0.001 actually, in the differences, kind of statistically speaking, of how much improvement happened in these intervention responses as a result of the training. And the SIRI 2 is that this measure includes expert criterion scores from leading suicidologists who kind of determine which statements people respond to are the most accurate. we can share much more information about the nuances of how that works. But the big picture here is that skills improved in a really incredible way. The second thing I want to share here is how we tracked responses to our tracking tool of folks who said, hey, you know what, I ended up using this with someone that I work with, or with someone who I provide meals to, or even with someone in my personal life. So we told over about 7 months, we tracked 31 interventions. 22 of them were somehow related to suicide. Maybe not so much, immediate risk where there's needs to be, 911 called or anything like that. But some folks who said, yeah, I've kind of had thoughts about wanting to die before, and they were able to use these skills to facilitate an intervention and to develop a plan for keeping safe for now from suicide in the moment when it was needed most. Another thing we learned is they actually used these skills in a situation where suicide really wasn't on their mind, but the model equipped them to help that person in the moment where they needed help due to whatever distress they were experiencing. Next slide, please. Some sustainability here. This project has informed our most recent work with ACL, and this is work that's ongoing that we've kind of incorporated into a warm calling program. We are continuing to compile evidence base to have that application to the NCOA evidence-based registry for assist. We have a statewide replication of Be With planned for next year in our current grant cycle that we're working on now. And we're just, all of this is kind of funneled into our next project, and we're continuing to kind of have these pieces moving ahead so that this could be something that could, be a pretty easy resource for various counties and organizations to say, hey, I want to invest in this training for my volunteers. Let's make it happen. Next slide, please. Some advice for others in this sort of setting. One of the most effective things that we learned is to train your leadership, train the decision makers, and assist. It's a very powerful training. It's a very hard sell sometimes to get people to commit to 2 days of talking about suicide, right? Like that sounds overwhelming and intimidating. And the training is very meaningful and very powerful and actually very encouraging and very uplifting. But there were some barriers and even some stigma around talking about suicide that when training leadership can really help alleviate that. I would say also too, to meet with the community partners early and often, get a really clear understanding of the need. This was something that we kind of learned as we went, and really understanding what it would take to get volunteers to receive the assist training, being able to compensate for time if they, missed from work and things like that. So there's a lot of kind of pieces there in making that happen. And then of course, be flexible. My goodness, I think everyone here has learned that in one shape or form or another over the past couple of years. But we were really grateful that we were able to continue this work and to move forward in this project, even when we had to shift to pretty much a virtual type of setting. We were very grateful that we had completed most of our scheduled assist trainings before that. Next slide, please. These are some of our resources. These are very broad and some different things that we've developed, including our replication project model in the resources that Alex mentioned earlier. There's a lot more here, as well as some peer-reviewed journal articles that I'd be happy to connect you all with as well. And with that, I think I have time for some questions.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Fascinating. So we do have a question that isn't necessarily maybe specific to your project, but just general advice.
Sure.
Any grant writing tips and how to secure grants like these?
That's a very good question. I would say to collaborate with folks who either have done this before or who are, kind of have one foot in the grant world, because we're really fortunate. Our PI on the project, Dr. Laura Shannonhouse, is a very grant active faculty member at Georgia State. And we've consulted with her and a lot of the other people who we know have secured, this type of funding in these areas. And so that was a big component. And honestly, I think the support that ACL has provided to us each step of the way, the support of kind of reaching out to talk through, every piece of this has been kind of really a game changer. I think another piece of this in securing a grant like this would be to be very transparent with and very solid in the community partnerships where you want this work to happen. When you apply for the grant, you know, kind of do whatever kind of, you know, and it's always like, for me, it's like, oh, you don't know what you don't know, right? So if I could go back in time and do this from the beginning, I would say to really sit down with and really understand the ins and outs of what is it going to look like if we were to partner with, you know, XYZ group or agency to get this underway, and having that be really solid in the grant application, having a really solid letter of support from the participating organization is a game changer. I think that's probably, now that I'm kind of processing this externally and out loud, that's probably my number one piece of advice there. That's a great question. Whoever asked that, that's a fabulous question.
Excellent. Thank you. And I think that's great advice that you just gave. So thank you. So now more specific to your project.
Sure.
Question is, what if any changes were needed on the operations side of HDM? That is shorter routes, stops, participants that an HDM volunteer interacts with during a delivery route?
That is a wonderful, wonderful question. And that is one that was asked pretty early on of like, what will this mean for folks if they have this? And, you know, a lot of the folks who did this were surprised at how much it didn't really deviate too much from their schedule. One of the really interesting findings in our research and how we track this is the people who kind of recorded and used this intervention the most had more consistent routes that they worked. So we had two different kind of groups. We had folks who were in some of the more suburban counties who had, you know, established routes that they had been delivering meals to for a decade, right? They had people that they knew them well. And part of our rationale in training home delivered meal volunteers from the suicide scholarship, from the literature of suicide, is they are what we call natural helpers. They are people who in the community are just kind of these, you know, beacons of light that people tend to gravitate toward. And for someone who receives a home delivered meal, maybe one of the few regular connections that they may have, right? Like a regular in-person connection, gatekeeping, if you will. And so we found something really interesting where the people who had those really established relationships tracked more and reported using it more and reported being able to have those kind of moments that didn't really too much impact their delivery. Whereas in some of the more urban counties that have these systems that are really kind of optimized around efficiency, because there's a lot of people in Atlanta and maybe not as many volunteers who can have those kind of regular, you know, meaningful week to week kind of interactions. That was a little bit different because, you know, their routes maybe change daily or weekly. They may not see the same people. So it really became a matter of trying to get food to as many people as possible. One thing that was really powerful, and this kind of goes back to my first, you know, a piece of advice of training leadership was, as a result of some of this work, we actually had counties who were interested in, you know, saying, hey, if you actually find yourself in a place where you are using these skills and you need some time to connect with this person, let us know and we'll take care of the rest of your clients. Like they were like, we want to kind of empower you to do that. We want to figure out systemically in our system that works for us, how we can, you know, let you, you know, be able to facilitate that intervention in the moment when it's needed. And then, you know, have someone be able to kind of have a protocol almost in place if that happened, which was incredible. That's an incredible thing to experience. In one of our counties too, the director actually, who didn't receive the assist training, she actually didn't get trained in assist. She was incredible to work with and just a really wonderful community partner, told us that, you know, I noticed a difference in my volunteers who went through this training. They're more likely to, if they need to miss any of their routes, to make sure their people are covered. They're really just kind of more attuned and more attentive and more just invested. And that was something that she kind of observed, you know, outside of even knowing what the assist training entailed, which was really powerful and really, really important. So that's a lot of an answer. It can happen, an intervention can happen still within a relatively short time. We're not asking folks to, you know, be talking to someone for 2 hours or anything like that. And there's been some, as a result of this, some kind of structural, you know, maybe questioning of how we can equip our system even more, that this would be a really powerful way to meet someone's needs in the moment when it's needed and kind of bypass the need for a referral or hospitalization or something like that.
Excellent, thank you. And this is
Sure.
precisely why we're doing this event, right? Because those
Yeah.
that have lived it, you're going to have these tips and these tricks, know what
Absolutely.
worked, what didn't, or kind of those lessons learned. So
Absolutely.
that's great. Next question is the assist refresher training, or is there a refresher training needed for this assist training?
So once you receive the assist training, the assist certification as a certified assist caregiver, you don't have to renew that. There's no kind of upkeep involved. Once you have the credential, you have it. However, there are refresher trainings if you would like that. If you get trained and 3 years ago and it's been a while and you really would love a refresher kind of on that, getting connected with a trainer who can provide those. It's like I want to say like a half day kind of thing that kind of reviews the intervention model that you learn and kind of help facilitate that. And that's available. That's certainly something that can happen, but it's also not a requirement. Once you kind of receive that assist credential, it's yours. It's different from CPR. We have to up it every 2 years, which
Right.
I need to do for mine now that I'm saying that out loud.
Reminder, mark that on your calendar.
Yeah, I know, right?
All right. And then the next question is, would you be willing and able to elaborate on your recruitment efforts to secure enough volunteers who were able and willing to dedicate that number of hours in a 2-day period?
Absolutely.
You mentioned some reimbursement for missed work. Great idea. Were there also other barriers?
Absolutely. We had, let me see where I want to start this. This is really where training the leadership paid off tenfold in getting folks to, the ones who are the decision makers, who have that kind of power, maybe so to speak, in the room, to get what is needed and how to make it work and really support you in that. One thing that we did was the assist training. The cost of the training itself is expensive, or I say it's actually very appropriate for 14 hours of suicide intervention training. There are CEUs available. If you have a professional license that requires continuing education, you can get 14 hours of continuing education in suicide, which is amazing. But there's participant materials, there's trainer fees, there's all these kind of fees associated with it. And the price of an assist training can range from $300 to $500 per participant. So that was not something that we were asking people to pay. Through our funding that we secured, we covered the cost of the training materials, and our trainers waived their trainer fee, with the hope of having this research component. So those are some of the things that we did to make it work. But what really kind of got us going was actually offering stipends and offering financial incentive for volunteers to come to the training. That was a big deal, to say, we'll actually pay you, something. Now, not a huge compensation, right? We're using our budget as wisely and responsibly as possible, but providing just a little something was a really big game changer for us in getting people to be there, and also having flexibility of when the trainings can happen. Some of the trainings we did were on a Friday, Saturday, so people only had to miss 1 day of work. We had trainings in the middle of the week because they said, hey, we're designating that our, senior services staff is going to get trained these 2 days, and made that happen. And that's where the community partnerships really are impactful too, because there's, you need a space to do the training. You need AV requirements. You need a screen, you need sound, you need food that needs to come from somewhere other than your grant money. So there's all these kind of logistical things where if you have that community partnership, if they are really bought in and understand what is needed early on, it's going to make everything really smooth. And I would say ours did. We just learned this as we went, right? Like we learned what specific things we need to be really kind of concrete about in making this happen. I hope that answers your question. It's a great question. These are all fabulous questions. These are awesome, awesome questions. Happy to help in any way I can.
All right. I do want to be cognizant of time, but we do have one additional question.
Sure.
And that is, how soon after training is it ideal to start the program implementation?
I mean, as soon as you find yourself in a situation where you may be utilizing these skills, I think in an ideal world, so kind of what we did in our project was participants arrived at the assist training, and the first hour of the training, we left we actually had folks get there a little bit early. and they completed those assessments. And then when they finished the training, they completed the post-test like before they left. So everything, we got all our data and everything kind of happened contained within those 2 days. And then when we were, leaving, that was also when we were doing that assessment, we provided that tracking link. I reminded them of it afterward. I sent kind of a follow-up of like, hey, just in case you you missed some of this, here's the resource and here's the tracking tool and all of that. And we had people, as early as like right after training say, wow, I use this with someone at my church. I found and that happens every time. I've trained this in a lot of different settings with a lot of different people, and that happens often. It's pretty powerful. In terms of like implementation and sustainability, I would say if you have the funding to train your people and you have these systems in place, then go for it. Like it can happen as soon as you're trained. There's no like, kind of critical window of waiting or anything like that. And one thing that's important that I'll share kind of pertaining to that, I've done research in other contexts, and this is something we're currently working on right now with HDM providers. We have different time points. So we're looking at this across time, and we're looking at the skill acquisition across time. So we have the data of the post-test right after they took the training. We also have a 3-month follow-up and a 6-month follow-up. Like we're looking at this longitudinally to see, do these skills hold up? And we're currently researching that right now. That's some of the stuff our team is writing and exploring now. But in previous contexts, I've done this with counseling students, with college students, with K through 12 staff, and all of our data says, yes, the skills are retained over time. So we expect that will happen, but again, we're working to explore that hypothesis.
Well, thank you so much. Another great presentation. Thank you all that have joined. I did want to mention that for those of you that were here for our previous presentation from Ryan Gatso, the Modernizing the Congregate Dining Program, we are working with him currently to actually record those questions we didn't get to and some answers. So that will be included with the recording of today. Those will go up on our YouTube page by Friday, and then we'll also share it out on our social media. So if anybody's still, around and waiting on that, that'll be available there. But all of our recordings will be available there. So on behalf of the Aging and Nutrition Resource Center, thank you so much for joining, and look for those recordings.